The 2020 iPhone 12 mini for under $250 USD on the used market is a tempting deal for those looking for a decently spec'd phone in a bite-sized portable form factor. But are there any hidden catches lurking beneath the quirkiness, especially 4 years on? Let's find out, starting with the design. So first up, this phone is darn tiny. With a 5.4-inch screen size, this is truly reminiscent of the pre-2015 days where mobile phones were actually designed to be mobile. It's only slightly taller than the iPhone 5S, but still shorter than the iPhone 6/SE design, so it's somewhere in the middle. Not too small, not too big, just right. Plus, the display takes up the entire area, rather than having the bezels and home button on those older iPhones diminish your viewing experience. The 12 mini fits in one hand like a Lego piece, weighing in at 135 grams and being 7.4 millimeters thin, and it's barely noticeable in your pocket. Now yes, while the size might feel refreshing at first, for many, including me, the novelty does wear off. Sometimes it just feels too cramped if I'm typing with two hands or trying to read an article, so this is definitely a very niche phone meant for a very specific demographic. It's not for everyone, and at least the big displays nowadays are easy on the eyes. And of course, smaller phones means smaller battery, but I'll get to the famously controversial battery life on here a bit later on. But apart from its size, the rest of the body is the same thing as the regular iPhone 12. It's a decently slick looking device. We get the glass back, square camera bump, and the flat edge redesign, although unfortunately, there is the old style larger notch that is really starting to show its age compared to the smaller notch and dynamic island that we're seeing on many late models. Although the notch does house the components for Face ID, which works just fine on here, super snappy to recognize you, and works with a lot of angles, so no complaints there. The stereo speakers in the notch and on the bottom are also just fine, nothing special, not as full sounding as the regular 12 speakers, but they do the job for what they are. Oh, and there's also wireless charging on the back and IP68 water resistance all around. But moving on to the display just below the notch, we get a 5.4-inch OLED panel with a resolution of 1080 by 2340 and pixel density of 476 pixels per inch. Don't be fooled for 1 second by the size. These are still some darn high-end specs, so the image is super crispy with no visible pixels and insanely vibrant HDR visuals and colors. I'm really glad that Apple put the same high-end OLED panel on here as the regular 12 despite the 12 mini's size, and not something like the mediocre 720p LCD display seen on the iPhone 11 the year prior. Plus, it also has a peak brightness of 1200 nits, so despite the bite size that it is, you'll be able to see what you're doing even on bright sunny days outside. In fact, if you're not a huge tech spec nerd, the only real genuine downside here is the size. Sharpness, color, and dynamic range wise, the 12 mini is still pretty top of its class. However, it is only a 60Hz display and not 90 or 120Hz like many mid-range phones nowadays, so you won't get those buttery smooth motions of swiping and scrolling around like on the iPhone 13 Pro series and above, which have 120Hz panels. But even to this day, all of the non-Pro iPhones still for some reason use 60Hz, so at least on the Apple side of mid-range everyday phones, you're not actually missing out on anything. Plus again, that larger notch is just that little bit more distracting than say the smaller notch or dynamic island, although the bezels around the sides are still very thin and aren't an issue. So yeah, despite being a very small and personal display, Apple still packed it full of high-end specs back in 2020. Everything still looks great, and if I'm being nitpicky, the only thing we're really missing is, again, a higher refresh rate. But something that you're probably missing is the best of the best when it comes to a phone case that's insanely durable, highly functional, and great value. Luckily, today's video partner Magback provides all three of those things. Not only do their cases offer the best of the best in terms of drop protection, but with the mag sticks, you can mount your phone to any surface, whether that be in your car, in the kitchen, or even just to show it off to your mates, all while the raised and padded corners provide top-end drop protection. And since the back is magnetic, you can stick it to any metallic/magnetic surface, including whiteboards, kitchen benches, or even elevator doors if you like to live life on the edge. Plus, it's MagSafe and wireless charging compatible as well. Magback also offers a wallet case accessory, which sticks onto the back of the case with just magnets, no glue required, and you can remove it at any time. And so, if you're looking for a high-end, multifunctional, solid and well-built case that won't fall apart in a few months like many other options out there, head to my link in the description below to get 15% off. And thank you so much to Magback for sponsoring this video. Now moving on to the camera setup on the iPhone 12 mini, we very fittingly get 12 megapixel main, ultra-wide, and selfie cameras. The main lens on here is still absolutely terrific. Despite being 4 generations behind, you're still getting that crisp, vibrant, consistent photo quality that iPhones are known for. Plenty of detail, colors are insanely vivid, and honestly, it's really not hard to get some super professional looking shots on here. The phone packs in so much camera functionality despite it being so tiny. It's still got all of the same high-end camera tech as the regular iPhone 12. Apart from, of course, the general progressive increase in quality that has come with every iPhone since the 12, there's genuinely no complaints on my behalf here. This kind of photo quality is bound to impress even the most hardcore of photography and tech spec nerds, although the rear lenses saw a pretty big jump in size on the 13 series the following year, so they're able to let in more light and therefore produce more detail and better colors too, but you'd only really notice if you did like a whole FBI side-by-side analysis. It's not even really noticeable to the untrained eye for most people. Now portrait mode still does the job just fine, no complaints. Of course newer iPhones have gotten better at not blurring the edges, etc, but even the edge blurring on here isn't really that prominent in the first place. The 12 mini also packs in night mode, which completely transforms photos taken in even almost pitch dark environments, and the tech still does a great job even 4 years later. And in fact the iPhone 12 series was the first to put night mode on every camera, not just the main lens like on the previous iPhone 11. The ultra-wide camera is pretty much the same story as the main lens, really punchy colors, although detail does take a bit of a hit since you're squeezing more area into that 12 megapixel frame, but you only really see that quality loss if you zoom in, and of course being a smaller display, that makes the imperfections harder to see. But yeah, no complaints from me about the ultra-wide on here. Same goes for the selfie camera, just super consistent, solid results that'll hold up for years and years to come. Plus, as I said before, we also get night mode on the selfie camera, which is an added nice touch. Now video on the 12 mini is absolutely phenomenal, being able to record super crispy, vibrant and stable video in up to 4K at 60 frames per second, and Dolby Vision HDR recording for the first time at up to 4K 30. Dolby Vision gives you an outstanding dynamic range, and quite a cinematic touch to your videos if you so desire, but normal video is still just as terrific all the same. Amazing quality and colors as in the photos, and whether you just want to capture your daily memories or take some cinematic iPhone video, the 12 mini certainly does not disappoint. So yeah, it doesn't matter what your camera needs are in a smartphone, because the 12 mini setup is super solid for like 99% of people 4 years later, and unless you're nitpicking or you know what to look for, photo and video on here really doesn't look too different from what we're getting nowadays. Obviously there have been some pretty big changes since then, but just looking at these photos for a few seconds, you can't really tell right off the bat that they were taken on an iPhone that's already a few years old. Something else that's generally quite indistinguishable from the later models is the performance. The 12 mini packs the Apple A14 chipset and 4GB of RAM, and it absolutely still flies through anything and everything with a spring in its step. iPhones nowadays are designed to stay as snappy and fluid for as many years as possible. It's no longer the old mindset of make it slow after 4 years so that you have to upgrade. Despite its minusculeness, the 12 mini is still the same powerhouse as the iPhone 12, and anything from simply calling, texting, sending emails, browsing the web, to intensive and heavy 3D games, there's really not much that's a problem for that A14 chipset. And while there may be some slight, very subtle and minor delays if you compare side by side to the newest iPhone 15s, that's all the delays are. Too subtle and minor to even notice or care about unless you're watching the very frame rate of swiping and scrolling around like a hawk or something. So yeah, whether you're just planning on doing light everyday activity or more power intensive stuff, the 12 mini is still lightning snappy and responsive, and it should remain that way for years to come. But speaking of years to come, that brings me on to the longevity of the iPhone 12 mini. How long into the future will it remain pleasantly usable for? Well, iPhones nowadays seem to be getting cut off from software updates at around 6 to 7 years, as we've seen with the recently cut off iPhone 10, 8, 7 and 6S. So with that in mind, the 12 mini should receive updates until around 2026, 2027, so it's got around 2 to 3 years left. But even after the updates stop, you'll still be able to use the phone as you normally do for around 1 to 2 years after that, before apps begin to slowly stop working with the older software version. So at this point, it's not one of those phones you'll be able to run into the ground over the course of years down the line, but if you're someone who usually upgrades every 2, 3 to 4 years or so, lack of software support definitely won't be an issue. And finally, moving on to the battery life, aka the second most controversial aspect about the 12 mini beside the size, we get a 2227 mAh cell, which is really not the most substantial, and it really shows in everyday use. The battery on here was never great to begin with, and years of battery degradation on most handsets leaves most of them with a sometimes pretty shoddy usage time. Although if all you're doing is the basics, texting, calling, social media, etc., and you're not really using your phone all that much throughout the day, it should last you, but if you're on your phone quite a bit, then the battery will definitely disappoint, even if the phone you bought has had a battery replacement. And even if you are a light user, always check the battery health of the phone in settings before you hand over your hard-earned cash. If the health is in the late 80s or higher, you should be good to go, but anything below like 85% will likely soon develop some problems. But yeah, the battery life was never any kind of selling point for the 12 mini. Lots of people, including myself, were pretty disappointed at just how quickly it would drain, and that's even more the case nowadays. But as I said, if you're not really on your phone that much, and you only really need something for the basics, the battery on here should pull through just fine. But if you're playing lots of heavy games or scrolling Instagram every chance you get, then the regular iPhone 12 or even the 13 mini, which I'll get to in a second, are without a doubt both much better options. And so, with everything about the iPhone 12 mini in 2024 now covered, it's pretty clear that this is more so a niche phone rather than something to please everyone. Its main selling point is the size, and that's all good and well, but you're going to be sacrificing a few things, like that big immersive display and extra long-lasting battery, but at the same time, it packs in some pretty darn powerful specs for its size, like the A14 chipset and camera setup, although the iPhone 13 mini from the year after can be had for around $120-ish more, and the 13 mini really bumped up the battery life to something a lot more usable and reliable, as well as some pretty big camera upgrades, shrinking down the display notch and providing more years of software support from now. So if you really want the best of the best small premium smartphone experience, the 13 mini is the way to go over the 12 mini, both value and overall user experience wise. Yes, it is slightly more, but it's an absolute night and day difference compared to the 12 mini. I mean, it's still not battery life that'll last a heavy user all day, but it doesn't drain like a sink either. Alternatively, there's also the regular iPhone 12, but if you're looking at getting a 12 mini, you probably want a compact phone, which the 12 isn't, but you're getting a bigger battery that'll last longer and a larger display, and the regular 12s can be found for about the same as the 12 mini, so that's another open door if the 12 mini's poor battery and small display are deal breakers for you. So yeah, the 12 mini is pretty bad value all in all when you can get the much improved 13 mini for not that much more, or even a regular 12, both of which solve the mediocre battery life problem. I mean, it's still a fun, quirky mini phone, but I ended up getting an 11 Pro Max after only around 6 months of using the 12 mini back in 2021 because the battery wasn't suitable for my heavy use. I was using my hotspot all day, and that tiny battery was just not holding up. But being the first generation of a new experimental product, you can't knock it too hard, and despite its flaws, it still works really well for a lot of people nowadays, especially since the mini line of iPhones are completely discontinued. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, please make sure you drop me a like and subscribe to TechSpree to find out what tech of yesterday is worth it in the present day. Also, if you'd like to have a stalk, my Instagram is at tech_spree and my X is at techspree1. Thank you so much for watching. This is Tom with TechSpree, and I'll see you as always next time.